imagination simply contained in the mind? Or does it tap into an unseen world with messages waiting to be told? There is a place where legends cross over into our world, where strange visions and whispers beckon, and superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow.
Welcome back to the Black Cat's Shadow. Thanks for joining us in this episode. We have a special interview episode for you guys today. It's me and Dave here. And so, Dave, who are we going to be talking to today?
You know, Shakespeare once said that what is done cannot be undone. And one thing is certain. The contributions from our guest not only cannot be undone, but likely unmatched. He has tackled film, television, music, and is responsible for one of my absolute favorite Stephen King adaptations. He has worked with Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. Our guest today truly rocks, as he is the lead singer of the rock band The Sloths. Please welcome Mr. Tom McLoughlin.
Thank you. That's a wonderful introduction. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for taking the time with us. We got a few movies we really want to boggle your mind about, but we also want to go through and just promote a lot of your work and tell people what you got going on and get people to watch some of these movies that they may or may not have seen.
That would be cool. And just know, guys, I make no money off of these things. It all goes to the corporations. But what I do want, obviously, is to hear people's feedback and what works for them and things, because so many of them were part of that incredible period in the 80s where, we were trying to be as cool as the 70s were, and never thought we really managed, except now your generation of horror film fans and things and have watched these things now in a whole different capacity. And really the 80s now mean a lot to a lot of people, which is great for all of us, who made those films at that time, because as I said, we just thought we were, schlumps trying to do something that was already done, and we were going to try to do our version, but it was never going to match the really, great things. But every generation, finds the stuff that they go, no, why don't they make it like that anymore? So you can kind of say that, I guess, about all of our work.
So I think I like the way you brought that up too. You said in the 80s you were trying to be a lot like the 70s. Well, I think most of us agree that for horror, the 90s kind of sucked. And so the 80s became very legendary, just like the 70s did. So I say you accomplished it very well.
Thank you. I mean, when you talk to people and see what it is that they loved, there is something very kind of nostalgic. And I guess the key thing that we did in the 80s was we created monsters again. Freddy, obviously, Jason, Michael Myers, Pinhead, Chucky. I mean, not since Universal and Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, Creature from Black Lagoon, was there really a group of monsters. And as you know, if you're obviously a fan of my Friday the 13th, I turned Jason into an unstoppable monster. And, I just borrowed from Frankenstein. Lightning bolt worked for him. A lightning bolt's going to work for Jason. And now you're trying to kill something that's already dead. Freddy existed, obviously, in that, dream realm that crossed over into reality. Everybody, I think, other than Michael Myers, was more, fantasy horror monster, types. Obviously, Chucky, doll that comes to life. And we also, kind of went, and I certainly was a huge advocate of this, the fantasy creatures like E.T., I had my angel that took me forever to get to the screen and Date with an Angel, because there was no Splash, there was none of that prior to, I could not get that movie made until there was all those other movies. Then they go, oh, okay, that works. But when you're first pitching something that's not normally what has been seen, in movies, then you're fighting. How do we know anybody's going to like that? But once something is successful, everybody's more than willing to jump on the, copy it bandwagon. So we were, most of us were getting franchised. Things like, all right, there's a great Halloween, so John Cunningham goes, all right, great, I'm going to make a Friday, and then that took off and superseded all the Halloween things. Same thing, the Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes, never thought that thing was a success, and then once it hit, the video market, by the time it went to the second one, third one, it just kept building, and found its audience. And it's amazing that here we are, 3 decades later, and these things are still as popular, if not more popular. And I just came back from a horror convention, and I mean, just to see how many things have those, icons on them, from T-shirts to buttons, and people with tattoos, shit's going to be on them for the rest of their lives. Obviously, it is really, a great honor to all of us to have actually been part of that era where we created something that has lasted, so long. And I think we're all waiting for something else to come along. And Universal's trying to just remake these things that I don't think very well. To me, it's such an obvious ploy to try to make money off of something that they own, as opposed to just making, a really cool movie. But it's hard. I mean, I have a new monster that I'm trying to put together, and something that is part of the cultural, has a huge cultural and religious background to it. And so far, no one has done it. And I don't know if I'll get there first or not, but my hope is to tap into that once again and see if we can actually create something that people go, that's friggin' scary, man. That's great, and it can kind of get to anybody. And so that's all I'm gonna say about it. That's it. That's the team.
When you do that, we're going to get you back on here to talk about the success that it does.
It'd be my pleasure, especially if it's successful.
Yeah, so Tom, obviously everybody knows you for Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. And but I wanted to kind of mention another movie. I think it was your first movie that you did, called One Dark Night, from the early 80s. And I really love that movie. It's it has an interesting story. You bring a really, I think, a terrifying villain to the screen. And I think a lot of times this movie gets lumped in with a lot of the 80s slashers, but it's not really a slasher. It doesn't rely on like the blood and guts and the cheap scares. It uses atmosphere, and I feel like it builds tension through the narrative and through the atmosphere that you're building through that. And just even through the location. I mean, that setting, the mausoleum, is such a great setting for a horror movie. So, but in that movie, like, of course, when you read online, you hear that the final product wasn't exactly what you guys had originally envisioned. So how did the final product differ than how you had originally imagined it?
Well, I would say, quite honestly, there's probably 80% of it is what was envisioned, because it was obviously shot. I mean, they had to use what we shot. I shot very visually. The only thing that really changed was the opening considerably, and then these constant cutbacks to Olivia, the daughter character, listening to these tapes, explaining things. Right. And all that was initially just what the Dockstader, Raymar, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, he's this Russian psychic who is a psychic vampire, and that's a true phenomenon. If anybody's been around somebody that just saps your energy. I mean, it just, you're around this person and it's like, oh God, and when they walk away, and they're not aware of it, and you're not really aware of it. You just think that they're boring, but the truth is they're literally, we are creatures that are, have an energy about us, and when we die, that goes away, and that's what people say is the soul. And there's so many different theories that we're still trying to put into scientific fact about all that. But I kind of jumped on that idea of a psychic vampire who literally knew how to drain energy from people, and then he could use that to experiment with the different psychic sciences, levitation, any kind of telepathic or any kind of like what's the thing, pyrokinetic, be able to create fires and stuff, King's fire starter. All those kinds of things that were, to me, fascinating, and things that I had just touched upon a little bit in terms of my own research and being around people who practiced it, just fascinated me to put it into a movie. So I didn't want to over-explain too much of that. So the Dockstetter character who worked with Raymar, there was one scene where he basically laid it out, which is what, I called my, Raiders of the Lost Ark scene, where it's like you have to stop the movie and tell people what the Ark is and then get on with the action. Right. So this, to me, was it. Was the explanation. They felt that they needed to shoot more of her listening, added more voice to it and things, which really, hurt the pace of the movie. So that, those elements kind of took it away. And the ending just wasn't the kind of the jump scare ending that we ended up adding on, for 10 cents at the end. We managed to have that one little thing that could at least send them out with a jump scare. So those were the elements that came back in. But that being said, over the years, having watched it and, read certain reviews about it and all that, I felt in this day and age, at that time, I needed to have things start more with a bang, and really, I was using a creepy factor that didn't quite work once it got reshot and had all these elements that they threw into it. And I wanted to introduce the Raymar character right up front, really get to, meet and see and how powerful he is and how evil he is and what his agenda was about trying to find his daughter, and then bring the other elements of the story all together. So I have been working on for a couple of decades now this re-envisioning of One Dark Night. It's partly a prequel to the first one, and then it really is not anything of that where it goes beyond where the first one ended, but it really brings all this stuff together in a much stronger story and a much stronger first and second act than the original had. So this is something that, once I get the rights and work with the company that owns the rights, who are now releasing, by the way, to get a plug in here, this month, I think in a week or so, it's coming out on Blu-ray, much nicer print than the one that's out there now on DVD. A lot of extra bells and whistles with interviews with E.G. Daly and myself and the DP and the production designer and Nancy McLoughlin, and we have just tons of people that we were able to, not tons, but a few people that we could get to that would give us interviews, and producer Michael Schroeder. It will be a really, I think, wonderful treat for those who love the movie, and that is coming out on Code Red and Kino, I think, are releasing it. It should be, I think it's like the 14th, 15th or so it's coming out, and we're doing a signing of it at Dark Delicacies, which is this very cool horror bookstore, here in Los Angeles, and having, cast and crew there to sign that as well. So yeah, if you haven't seen the movie, at least you're going to see it in a much better state than the DVD that's out there is.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to picking that one up, because I had seen it several years ago and kind of forgot about it, and then I just saw it was on Amazon Prime right now. I was like, oh, I'll watch it again, and man, it's I think it's a great movie. I mean, I think I really liked it. It had a lot of atmosphere, which is what I like, and you did mention it's kind of a slow burn, but I really like it, and I'm excited to see what you make of like the revision and things like that, how you add more of you let people see more of Raymar, because that was definitely something I noticed, that Raymar was there. He was like the antagonist, but you didn't really see him a whole lot. You kind of just saw like his effects, the things that he did. And almost the mausoleum was more of a, antagonist of the movie, almost just, the place itself became kind of like the monster, if you will. So yeah, I'm really excited to see more of Raymar, especially in your reimagining that you're going to be doing. So that's really cool news.
I mean, yeah, that's the risk always is, I was supposed to direct the prequel to The Exorcist. I was on it for 2 years. Not a lot of people know that, but there was, announcements in Variety and all that about doing it. And of course, everybody I knew go, "Are you fucking crazy? This is going to kill your career, man. Are you nuts?" And I go, "Look, The Exorcist, the original, is the reason I'm making horror movies. It just stands to me for everything that an event, an experience in a movie represented, because I was fortunate to be in that early crowd that was there, passing out, throwing up, ambulance in front, William Friedkin and William Peter Blatty out front, giving out coffee and stuff to the line. I mean, it was amazing thing, guys, to be a witness to it. And I studied that movie like crazy. So the only reason I even got the job is because they wanted the people that did the Blair Witch Project, because that had just hit, and they didn't want to do another horror movie. They had other aspirations. And I came in just like a house on fire about doing this, and I got the gig. But it was a script that just didn't quite work, and William Wisher wrote it, and he got paid a lot to write it, but he just kind of did a revamp of the original in a way. But there was other elements that, if you did see one of the two versions that ended up coming out, that's a whole nother story, all that twisted and turned. But I just felt the script needed to be, it needed to not have any visual effects that were not on camera like the original. That was really important to me, the deepening of the story. But the thing that I was really attracted to was to make something that almost looked like The Godfather, because it would be taking place in the 40s. And to get that element, it would be in Africa. It would be the first time Father Merrin confronts the demon, where he really has to accept the fact that this is something that is real. But the coolest thing was the opening that Wisher had written, where his faith was put on the line with the Nazis. And that was a incredibly written scene that when I read that, I said, that I want to see, where a man is faced with that decision, either, tell something that was given to him in confession and or watch these townspeople get shot right in front of him. And then the fact that they dug up this demonic church that another church, the Catholic church, had been built upon. All those elements to me were there. So we talked about it. We did location scouting in Africa. We met with kids that were going to play, the possessed child, and the whole idea of reversing the thing of taking some child that it was, born out of a rape and was deformed and, just very strange and scary looking, and then changing him into this incredibly intelligent and just conniving and evil, side. A little more probably towards like the Omen idea of like the way, Satan would have been reborn. And to watch how all this stuff would now transpire in terms of the battle between the devil and God, through the priest and through this child. But we just couldn't nail that script, in my estimation. And so, I had met with William Peter Blatty. I spent the entire day with him, which was one of the great moments of my life. He gave me a cassette of a real exorcism in Italy, that they based a lot of the sounds, all that, and to hear a real one, was chilling. And I did all this research, and I had shelves packed with books on Catholicism and demonology and all this. And yet at the end of it, I had promised Blatty that if this wasn't, it's never going to beat The Exorcist. And I got to do something better than The Exorcist 2. But his Exorcist 3, I thought, was really cool, other than the exorcism aspect, which he himself hated to having put in there. But I thought, if I could just make a really decent prequel that really was scary and creepy and didn't rely on any, visual, digital effects and stuff. But it wasn't going that way, and so I walked away. Had to sign things that I had nothing to do with any of it, and went over to John Frankenheimer, who I thought, I worked with John. I was his monster in Prophecy. I don't know if you know that or not. I was in that freaking bear costume.
Oh, wow.
But it gave me a chance to learn about how a movie of that magnitude was made, and I was on the set all the time, and got to be close friends with Kevin Peter Hall, who was the Predator and the Harry and the Andersons and stuff. Wonderful, wonderful guy. It was heartbreaking losing him. But it was, that was a great experience. So I thought John, would do a great job. And after a year, unfortunately, John passed away, and they gave the script back to me. I read it; it was the same script. They didn't change it. So I passed, and then it went to Paul Schrader. And Schrader, I thought, okay, Calvinist, he's going to go in there and he's going to shake this thing up. I mean, he shot the script. And so he turns in his director's cut, they fire him. They blame him for it not working. It's like he shot the script. So then they hire Rennie Harlison to come in and, it basically add things to it. But Rennie ended up shooting the whole script all over again. So now they have two versions of this. And ultimately, neither one of them really worked. I mean, it just kind of, to me, I wanted to see it succeed just because I love the genre, and things happen where you don't agree on certain aspects of stuff. It happens all the time in movies, but this was so off, and people just hated it. So it was, it never made any money, and there's obviously not been an Exorcist 5 yet. So, but they got a TV series, which I didn't see. I don't know if you guys saw any of it. People told me a lot of it, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it.
But my One Dark Night, going back to that, was off of those influences, not slasher. I could have had a deal if I made a slasher movie at that time. I just wanted to make something that was more my sensibilities. And I had gone into the catacombs in Paris when I was there. I loved that feeling of being surrounded by the dead, being alone with a candle. And so I just brought it over to here and made it a mausoleum, and then thought, well, if I could make it feel like the corridors in Alien, those long halls, and yet behind all this slick white marble were these rotting cadavers, and I didn't want them to walk because I never believed anybody could do better than what George Romero did, in Night of the Living Dead. That was just so creepy. And there's been some great zombie movies, there's no question. But for me, I didn't want to go into that. I thought, well, if this guy's got telekinetic power, what if he just floats these suckers? And it's the old thing of, little boys putting salt on a snail and then chasing your sister with it, and freaking her out because it's so gross, and that was that kind of thing. I substituted blood and guts with, maggots and pus and decomposition and things. And so that was kind of my way of saying, oh, let's do a horror movie, in that way. So again, if I redo this, all those elements will still be there. It's just, to me, character and, the one aspect that we kept mysterious, which may be still the better thing to do. And I was literally borrowing from Spielberg and Jaws, the way Stephen and Verna Fields, the editor, approached that shark is, do not show it, do it then, and then at the end you get to see it big time. And I thought with Raymar, if we really don't get to meet him and you wonder, what does he look like? And then when he comes out, and here it's on the commentary of One Dark Night that you're going to get when you buy the Blu-ray. But that face of Raymar is actually Christopher Walken.
Oh, wow.
The special makeup guy, Tom Berman, Christopher was not a known actor at that time. He came in to do some movie, and he had his face cast. And when I said I wanted this kind of John Barrymore, Svengali type guy, instead of going out and making that, they just said, well, this guy's probably never going to go anywhere. Let's use his face. But if you look closely, you can actually see Christopher Walken in there. So that was kind of the direction that we went in, is that you're not going to see him until that coffin opens. And then, we used real Tesla coils. None of that was any kind of added on visual effects. I mean, that was real lightning bolts coming out of his eyes. And so, again, I was all trying to hold on to that old school approach.
I am going to slide right in there because there's a few things that you said that hit home for me. One, so awesome that you talked about the catacombs in Paris, because Phantom of the Opera is my favorite movie of all time. 1925. Love it.
Oh, yeah.
I highly respect the way you work. You mentioned, about The Exorcist and realizing how great of a movie is and wanting to pay utmost respect to it and then give your own credibility to it. Not a lot of directors are also screenwriters. And so I think it's amazing how you talk about seeing the script and seeing what the script is worth and wanting to, direct a movie that you could be proud of and passing on a script that doesn't meet it rather than just make it for the money. So that really stands out. Talking about script writing and directing, right after doing One Dark Night, you found yourself doing The Man Behind the Mask, Friday the 13th, Part 6. Mm-hmm. Jason Lives. So, you mentioned already about the Universal Classic, so I have to easily assume that you're, a monster fan. What was it about Jason that you wanted to get involved with the series?
It wasn't something I wanted to get involved in. In fact, it was, as I've just said with One Dark Night, I was really kind of going, not that I didn't love a good slasher movie, and not that I didn't think John Carpenter made a brilliant thing, which literally revolutionized, to me, movies at that time. He was again going old school. His heroes were, a lot of our heroes, Howard Hawks and John Ford and those guys. But he took those elements and those things that he believed what good filmmaking was, suspense and things, and made that movie. So seeing it in the theater that first, opening day with the crowd, it was incredible. And these are the days, guys, when audiences were verbal. I mean, nobody was hushing anybody because they loved the fact that people were yelling at the screen and talking to each other, and screaming, and brothers would be jumping up and going up the aisle and going, "No, I'm done with this motherfucker. I'm out. I mean, it was a show. It was like a total immersion in the experience of seeing a horror movie with an audience that loved it. The only thing we have now, obviously, are the mazes and things that people have put together, and these horror escape rooms and stuff is another way to kind of get the audience to be part of it. But the movies at that time were that. So, the slasher movies were the most popular. And in this town, in Hollywood, you could get a deal if you had a script that had a forest, a guy with a knife, and a girl. More girls, the better, more weapons, the better. If you can get the forest, that goes into a cabin, it goes into something else that's, you can't get out of, you literally could get a deal. And that's why there's so many of those movies. Some had some people who were really good, and others were just like, you could see they were make a buck. Even Sean Cunningham's first Friday really wasn't a slasher movie. It was a vengeful mother. It kind of got that that label, and you didn't meet Jason until the very end, and he was a kid, and that was again one of those Carrie jump scares that we were all copying, to give it a big bang at the end. And the second movie, he was Elephant Man with a burlap sack over his head, and then finally come the third movie, it's the hockey mask guy. So for me, the Friday movies were something that I saw the first one, and I hadn't seen any of the other ones. And I was offered this because I wanted to do April Fool's Day that Frank was doing, but it went to another director. And then they came to my agent and said, would he consider doing a Friday the 13th? And when my agent asked me, I said, no, I don't want to do one of those things. They go, are you kidding me? This is going to, 6 months from now, it's going to be in a theater, 1,800 screens. You really? And I go, well, I want to do this romantic comedy. I've been talking to Frank Capra, and I've got this thing about an angel, and that's what I really want to do. And they go, look, what would it take you to do this? And I go, well, if I could put some humor in it, if I could do something different with it, I just don't want to do another slasher movie. It's the sixth one. And how did the last one do? They hated it, And I went, okay, all right, I'll meet with him. So I met with Frank Mancuso Jr., and he said, look, we need to bring Jason back. We made a mistake, when we're not going to make again. Find a way to bring him back from the dead. That's that's the marching orders. And I said, could I put humor in this and make a little bit of a sort of a satire about, the slasher genre? And he go, what do you mean? You can make fun of Jason? I go, no. Jason will be unstoppable. And he's like, I don't know exactly how yet, but, So if you go on YouTube and look up Legends Never Die, Hollywood Forever, Legends Never Die, Hollywood Forever, there's a little 5-minute black and white documentary where I show you where I wrote my Friday the 13th, which is in the cemetery right next door to Paramount, and how it was really about me trying to figure out there, what I picked up. And of course, my influences were those Universal horror movies, and in particular Frankenstein. So obviously the easiest choice was, okay, I got to bring him back with a lightning bolt, and I got to figure out a way that, I could still keep the storyline going with Tommy, who was introduced in part 4. And then part 5, he was there, but I sort of just talked about at the very beginning, they got out of a mental institution, him and Horshack there, Lolo, who was great. And that's all I would really say about, the part 5 connection. And then the rest of it was going to establish the backstory of Jason and the mother. And Tommy, it's again, a borrowing from, the Bride of Frankenstein, where the old guy in the beginning says, I need to see that he's really dead. I need to go down there, and it's like, oh, Fritz, don't, and he falls down and he sees him. So it's that same idea with Tommy. I got to see his bones. I got to make sure he's in that coffin. And of course, there he is. He freaks out. He stabs him. The lightning hits, and we're off to the races. And now we have a Jason that is unstoppable. You can't kill something that's already dead. Bullets go through him. He can punch a heart out. And that was the other thing, morally. And yes, some of us actually have morals in this world of horror. I didn't want imitatable acts. I didn't want to just have a knife go in and split a throat or whatever. He's going to twist a head and pull it off, even though you didn't get to see all that thanks to the MPAA, but that looked very cool when he pulled off Sissy's head. And if he was going to decapitate somebody, it was going to be a triple, and if he was going to, push somebody backwards, it would go all the way back and, snap their back. Just things that are super strength and really create him as an unstoppable force. Then at the same time, do the little James Bond tribute in the opening to tell people right up front, look, we're making this like it's the successful franchise it is, like James Bond. We're going to have fun about it. But at the same time, I need to make Jason scary and make the kids have a sense of humor, hopefully make them likable. And that's where the Frank Capra influences come in, where it's like, you want to like people up there. And then when they die, it's like, oh, shit, why'd you kill them? I like them. As opposed to, oh, yeah, kill that bitch. She's just annoying. And, I wanted people that literally had agendas and had, something about them that you liked. Right from the first counselors that we meet, that just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they piss off Jason, honk at him, and then bang, down goes Tony Goldwyn and my ex-wife. Boom, right from the beginning, you realize it's not that he's out to get them, people get in the way. Then the big thing was putting children in. I felt that was, we have a camp, a kids camp, and we never saw kids. So getting past that, was actually easier than I thought it would be, because I know working with children can be very difficult, and we're shooting nights. But we had very, very supportive parents down in Georgia who stayed there and just loved being part of the whole thing. They were fans of the franchise, and the kids were great. And I love working with kids, and I had no intention of having anything happen to the kids, but I wanted to take us right up to the edge where the monster's literally, you're in bed, and he's looming right over you. And of course, when he just happens to disappear as you're praying, you do the first thing that kids do, look under the bed or in the closet, is that where the monster went? So the under the bed, shot, was put in there. So everything in most of the film was either a bit of an homage to the movies that I loved, or just my own sense of humor in the language, the slang, that the kids and the characters used. And so I really wanted to own it in that regard. But I knew I risked a huge thing with the fans if they just didn't buy into this different approach. And in the beginning, the first thing that happened was we got good reviews because they said, shit, how can you hate a movie that is making fun of itself? And the big saving grace was the caretaker breaking the fourth wall and looking right in the camera and saying, well, some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
Yeah.
Which ended up being the title of the book that Joe Maudry did on me about 2 years ago that, traces my whole twisted background from, birth all the way to the present. But strange idea of entertainment was something that I thought, well, that's what we all are into. It's like we love these things. We love watching people get offed in, crazy creative ways. We love the suspense. We love, being taken to the edge and pushed into the nightmare and then being able to get out of it at the end and enjoy the ride. It needed to me to be a ride. And that's kind of the way I approached it. And 31 years, because it was August 1st, 31 years later, I mean, I get more stuff than I get on birthdays, Christmas, anything else from fans. I mean, it is amazing. And I feel incredibly blessed that people so love that movie that, it's more popular now than ever before. And it is something that people literally say, I saw it at a certain time in my life and then I couldn't stop watching it. And I go, really? I mean, to me, it was like a funhouse ride, but it's like you never know what a movie is going to do to certain people at certain times in their life. I have those same kinds of movies in my life that really, I needed that movie at that time, and I have that incredible bond to it. And other people go, really, that was a piece of shit. I go, no, it wasn't. No, it was great. And we're always arguing about those things, which is great because it is so subjective. It's like the people that are your, the romances in your life. You like her, him? Are you kidding? Him? It's like, I don't know. There's something about them, and who knows? Again, it go back to that energy thing that there's that yin yang, black white. There's needs to be a connection. The opposites that connect are just things that are of like that get drawn together. And movies, to me, have that. Particularly when you see it, theater with people. You can think that experience can be so ruined, or it can be just like, wow, that changed my life. So it's a wonderful profession to be in for any of you guys out there that want to pursue it. It's tough. It's hard. It's sometimes seems like nobody has any sense of, gee, you're really hurting somebody if you do that. It's like, no, we don't care. It's the product, that's important. But to me, the product is important if it ultimately is something that really means something to somebody, and it's not just you trying to make a dollar,
Yeah, your passion really does show. I like how you brought up the certain things that did stand out to me, especially with the, how do you bring somebody back from the dead? Like, well, lightning, the Frankenstein reference. Absolutely loved it. And I thought CJ Graham did an amazing job as Jason. And Andy and I were having this discussion before starting this too. There is such a cult following for the Friday the 13th series. And a lot of it does evolve around the first one and the sixth one, because it kind of revamped the series after the downfall of the fifth one. And so we loved what you did with it. Andy and I both have recently just gave it the old rewatch, and you can see the aspects of horror with comedy and action, even the car chase scenes in the movie, something that hadn't really been done many times before. So I personally, I think it worked really, really well, and I absolutely loved the James Bond opening.
Nobody saw that coming, and it's like it was one of those things where when I thought it up, it's like, and that's because I love James Bond. I was 12 and my dad took me to see Dr. No, and that was a life changer for me. I was a huge Sean Connery James Bond fan, and was very pissed off when he left and Roger Moore took over, and it's like, not that he didn't do a great job too, but it was like, those early Bond things were so much a part of my teen love of movies and action and things. So yeah, all those little nods, all those little references to Carpenter and Cunningham and, Karloff's Market, was me saying, look, I'm very aware I'm stealing from the best, here's the acknowledgement, here's the credit. So it's, it needed to be a fun experience as well as a scary experience. And hopefully it works as a movie. And to me, a movie is something that, starts with a premise and has a conclusion that kind of wraps it up. And I also wanted to wrap up the whole legend aspect to put Jason back in the lake where he drowned. So there's a closure, thing that so many of the movies never had. It's like you just come up with something that's like, well, here's a good place to end. And then maybe give him a sense that, he's not really, really dead. And we had actually 4 different endings, on that I shot that were sort of like the endings on top of the ending, where you got to see like the sheriff's deputy, in the cell and somebody coming in. And there's a bunch of things we tried, but ultimately, it really got down to, the wrap up, back to the lake. Is he there? Yes, he's there. He's chained down there, but you just see, for a moment, CJ's hand gripped, and I used that moment as like, wait a minute, did I just see that hand move? And then cut to the eye, and then bang, right to Alice Cooper's, cool ass song, man.
Yeah, and it did exactly what you said before. It gave it that kind of like at the end of Carrie, just one last, shock factor before ending the film. And that's a great way to end a horror movie. I do have to start to geek out now as we transcend with the things you have done. Please. 1991. I am such a huge fan of Sometimes They Come Back. Oh. And I had a couple of questions. I just really wanted to ask you about that because I watched it when I was younger. I watched it, in the mid times, and I watched it twice this weekend just to make sure that I had this right. And this film, for me, still holds up immensely. And what really got me is I never read the Stephen King short, so my only knowledge of this story is what you showed me in the film. And I was going to ask you, were there any changes or major additions that you did to the movie that were just your own personal take?
Well, I'll say 2 things. One, if you want the long, complete version of this, there's literally a whole chapter devoted to this movie in the book Joe Madry did on me, Strange Idea of Entertainment. And he really, because we said 3 months of interviews and stuff, you really mined that whole thing. So if you're a fan at all, so much of the backstory and things are in there and what was going on in my life when I made that movie. So there's for me personally, there's a lot more depth to that film that, as my son says to me, he cries every time he watches this because, he sees me in Tim Matheson. He sees the family, aspect to this thing. And he grew up around a dad that was into all this stuff. So, of course, he was exposed to, the fantasies and the horror and the dark side, but as a piece of entertainment. And that movie in particular, of all the 40-something, films I've done now, it was the one that, really has resonance for him. But when I was making it, my dad had just died, like, a week before. I had all these other projects. I did a thing called Stephen Banks Home Entertainment that I had just directed and we shot, and my daughter had just been born. So I had these mixed emotions of all the stuff that came in. And that movie, man, was cursed. And you can, again, get the details in the book. But every day something happened on that set, that was bad. And we kept going. And it was like a 28-day shoot that went 36 days, which for basically a low-budget /TV movie, because it was being shooting it for CinemaScope overseas for Dino De Laurentiis's, release in Europe as a feature, and then for CBS had to be, the 1/66 format. Again, it's tough to do both things, and shooting 2 versions of the kills and stuff, so that there was one for the features and one for television. So there's a lot of stuff that was crazy in the execution of it. But what I had in there that was partly from the original script, and then we had, a number of rewrites that were done uncredited. And one of the writers, and his name just went out of my head, he created that series, Heroes.
Okay.
NBC. What's his name? I'll think of it hopefully before this ends. Really amazing. And he and I talked about what it was that needed to be in there. And really, I wanted to ground it in a family and in the Tim Matheson character and his love for his brother, and really, take these villains, and they are villains to him in a way that they took away his brother. They're back. To get their revenge on him for what he did. So there's a lot more depth to it, and scenes like when he sees his brother, in the cemetery. Those things, I really wanted them to have an emotional aspect. And Terry Palmieri did the score. He really worked very hard to get those themes and stuff, so they had a resonance, to the movie too. So I have a really deep connection to that movie on a lot of levels. And there are people that go, yeah, I read the book. None of that stuff was in there, and because it was just a short story. And Stephen King himself said, well, it's sort of like the best of. There's a little bit of Christine in there. There's a little bit of Stand By Me in there, And we had to do that because the story was literally just the thing of these guys, these thugs coming back. And so, everything had to be kind of created around that. Dino owned the title and the rights to it, and this other guy who gets credit at the end, who helped, Martin Sobalski, I think is his name, and he owned the titles of all these Stephen King things. So, had no creative input or anything to it, but we had to basically take what was there and make something more with it. And I was really, really fortunate. I had some great actors, and working with real guilty pleasure of mine, Brooke Adams, who I adored, Days of Heaven, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and all the things that just made me think, gosh, there's something about her that's really special. Tim and I are like brothers and continue to be like brothers, still are, and so that was a really great, having somebody that was sort of an extension of myself, doing the part. And I don't know, there was a real strong connection. But the bottom line is to me, I was really trying to get what Stephen King does so well, is that you hear people's thoughts in his books. And it's, there is if you can't get that exact, narration or whatever, in there, we got bits of it. Then you really got to go with characters and the relationship and what they play off, which is still to this day, The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken is my favorite Stephen King movie, because to me it had so much emotion and it had, such great stuff about it. And other than, of course, The Shining, which he hated, still, it was a hell of a ride. So yeah, I had to go in with a very small budget, and yet got a lot of grace from Dino to allow me to go from 28 days to 36 days. And Dino used to call me and say, what the hell is going on there? And I said, sir, we're trying the best we can. We had this happen, and transportation walked out. We didn't have this, and we almost had an accident here, and Brooke Adams twisted her foot, and there was always there was an ambulance on our set every other day. And then we find out that we're shooting, that whole cave was actually disturbed Indian burial ground.
Wow.
Which we didn't know, until later. So there's so many different reasons that we could put on why we were so cursed. But at the end of the day, the movie all came together, and every time Dino would yell at me, that this last thing was, "Are you giving me a goddamn good picture?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "All right, keep going." And how often do you have a producer like that? He's old school mode, and we did that with An Angel Together, then that, and a bunch of other almost happened movies with him. He was one of a kind. Did I ever answer your question? God knows I went on.
Oh, and yeah, no, in many words. And I just, hearing you talk about it, it makes me so happy, because there were so many things about that movie I loved. And, it's not easy to bring a Stephen King story to life and have people love it, because he has such devoted fans. But I think, you talk about how much this movie was cursed, and I'll have to read the book. I got to go get the book tonight to see what this is about. But I see nothing but greatness when I watch this movie, because like you, I really appreciate character development. And I thought you had an amazing cast. Everybody fit the role they played perfectly, and I thought you were very lucky and fortunate, not only with your talent to make this movie, but to have so much greatness kind of on set with you. It's not easy to work with kids and then have one of them nominated for an award for his performance, and then to have everybody in there. I'm almost dumbfounded by it, but I have to ask you about whenever the characters transcend around, there was a sinister growling that was going on in the background. Was that something that was mentioned before, or did you add that in there?
The sounds, you mean?
Yeah, like whenever, even just something as simple as a character would turn around, you would just hear the growling, because they didn't look sinister on the outside for most of the film, but you always got that presence.
Yeah, I was really, really big, and again, I have to give the nod back to the original Exorcist, that in dissecting that movie like it was a cadaver and I had to do an autopsy, I tried to learn everything I could about why did that moment happen? Why, when we're going towards that door, did I feel something really awful? I mean, I knew I was going to see something, but what was it? Well, they had these bees in a jar that they shook up and multi-tracked. So there's a, and there was like the sound of a animal getting killed, like a cow, when the thing hits them, and what that sound is. I mean, he borrowed all kinds of really awful things that were a part of that. So when I approached this movie, I thought, well, there's a lot that I can't show because of the type of movie it is and what it's doing. But right from the beginning, when the opening title sequence, if you listen, and hopefully if you have a good system, there is so many different sounds and squeals and weird things that we put together, and me at the microphone going and just so they're real sounds that were then kind of played with a little bit. And I wanted to keep that going through the whole film so that you also felt something. You heard it, but it was more what you felt from those moments. And I had this incredible, sound designer, Dane Davis, who went on to do The Matrix and The Abyss and all these other, brilliant. And so whatever I would give him, he would come back, with stuff that was just, freaking great, and if there was something I wanted more, we would do it on the day in the mixing room, go and grab a microphone and let me try this, let me see if we can improve on that. And it was a huge part of that movie. And until they came out in a decent format, because you didn't hear it on TV on your shitty little speakers when it was released. And overseas, I don't know how it played in terms of the rooms. But once they got in there and did a proper mix, for DVD and Blu-ray, you could finally hear all those sounds. But yeah, the soundscape was incredibly important to me, because that's that thing that affects you, in a much more subtle way. And it usually takes a couple of viewings before people go, oh, now I hear that. First time, it's just a sound, that's accompanying it, and you don't really think about it. But, I, like any artist, to me, you have to acknowledge the people before you, the masters, the people that, influenced you, and you try to use those things in a way that, it becomes yours because you're putting it in a different context. But, I teach film now, the part-time adjunct at Chapman University, Dodge College. And one of the books that I use that just came out is called Steal Like an Artist. And it's all the great, Picasso through all the great writers and sculptors and filmmakers and everybody acknowledging the fact that nobody creates anything new. It's stuff that has been there before, but when it's played through you, you make it yours in some way. And people don't want to go, oh, you just ripped off that person. I tell the film students, if somebody says, wait a minute, isn't that from The Exorcist? You go, absolutely, but I just loved it so much I had to put it in, but you don't go, what do you mean? I didn't steal that. It's like, no, the greats all acknowledge it, hacks borrow, artists steal. And stealing is in that term, not taking something away from that person, but you take it and you use it and then you acknowledge the source. But hopefully, somebody then hears and sees your stuff. I've had so many people, take elements from my Friday, and I've seen it in the work. If you see Friday the 13th, get Friday 13th, the game, you know, the trailer has got so much Jason Live stuff in it. I'm honored. I'm honored that that had, you know, was being used in that, you know, for their context. It's not that I get any money off of that or anything. It's not about that. It's just to go, you made something that people thought were cool and they want to make it theirs. So it's all, to me, part of that sharing, you know, what somebody else has done, acknowledge them, you do it, somebody takes that, hopefully they acknowledge you, you know, and it continues.
Well, unfortunately, this can't be the Sometimes They Come Back podcast because I'd keep talking about it all day with you. But to wrap that segment up, I would just say I love the film. I thought it was brilliant. The camera work is amazing. Even scenes where you knew the guy was going to be climbing through the window, but the choice was to show him in the chair and panoramic view, spin around, and then show climbing through the window, to the simple aspects of there's no peephole in the door, so you don't know what student is outside the door when a student shows up. I thought everybody did a great job in there. And if anybody listening hasn't seen this movie, you have to watch it. It's true brilliance.
Well, I guess the final proof is, and you know, and this is the dumb part of me. Prior to that movie, I did Date with an Angel, and you know, I had a whole back end deal on that because I so believed in the movie. I took less money up front and, you know, back. Of course, you know, the movie was part of all the DEG movies that Dino's company had done that went bankrupt. So everything went away. There was no participation in any of that. So the next movie Dino has me do is this. And I, you know, and it's like when they started talking about participation, I said, no, I want all the money up front. That's it. Anybody else can have it. Well, the thing ends up being so successful, it spawned 2 or 3 sequels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was at least 2 more.
And so had I made that other deal, you know, I would have been part of that whole thing. But again, you know, no one knows what's going to happen. So it's like, I don't regret it, but I just think it's so funny, ironic, you know, that the way things go. But yeah, I just, you know, I have such fond feelings about that movie, not even as a scare movie, but just as a kind of a piece of supernatural and humanity, you know, elements coming together to hopefully make a piece that was, you know, heartfelt as well as scary and make people open to some of those things that are beyond, you know, news, weather, and sports.
Absolutely. And the way that, I mean, the characters are so relatable. You really feel invested in the family. And I love the way that you managed to transcend past and present with something as simple as on the TV screen or on the porch or in the tunnel. It really, really worked. But I don't want to fast forward too far because, believe it or not, Date with an Angel was my first exposure to Phoebe Cates, because I remember I was pretty young when these movies came out, and I just seen this crazy short-haired lady with a shotgun or a rifle, whatever it was, and falling down the stairs in her underwear, and she was just so annoying. I remember seeing that, and I'm like, what are we watching? And I could thank my mom for that. She had got that, and we actually owned that movie because my wife hadn't seen it, and she likes a lot of the 80s romantic comedies. I'm like, oh, you have to see Date with an Angel. So we do actually have that movie. So great movie too.
You know what happened with that movie that was really shock? I mean, this was the movie that I think I mentioned earlier that when I befriended Frank Capra, that I, you know, would send him drafts and he would, you know, respond to me. He was never giving me notes, but he would say, you know, this is working. Well, the last draft worked better, I think, in the first part. I mean, he was very, very general with it. But then when the movie was finished and I sent it to him, he actually gave us a quote, you know, that you know, he really loved it, which wasn't used because Dino felt that no one knew who Frank Capra was. And I, of course, went crazy. I said, if I made a Western and John Ford said, this is a great Western, you know, wouldn't you have used it? Yeah, but this is not a Western, you know. But at least I know, and it was printed in Hollywood Reporter or one of those publications about his, you know, his quote. But the main thing with Date was that it also was that the Michael Knight character was very much a part of me, you know, and the guys in there, Don, George, and Rex, were real friends of mine with their names. You know, there's a lot, again, very personal aspects to it in the creation of the movie, and discovering Emmanuel Béart was incredible because we did a search, you know, for an angel, somebody that we hadn't seen before, somebody that I could believe in my mind could be angelic. And I mean, there was, we had all the top models. We had all these people that I saw. I literally saw, no exaggeration, over 4,000 applicants for that, some in person. Wow. Dino had lots of money at that time, so I was on planes every other day, to England, to France, to Montreal, to Sweden. People were flowing up from New Zealand and Australia. I mean, it was incredible. And of course, I wrote that thing when I was single, and I thought, this is how I'm going to meet Mrs. McLoughlin.
Give me an angel, right?
Yeah, give me an angel. And of course, by the time I got around to making it, I was now married, and Nancy was pregnant. So it's like, now it's just going to be a job. I just got to find that person that is inspiring. And I managed to get Emmanuel Béard, who was the top star in Paris at that time with the movie Nano of the Spring. And I saw her on a poster, and I went in, saw the movie. I saw that she did it very non-verbally. I said, that's it. She speaks with her eyes. I can hear her thoughts, and then we had to go about, trying to get the top star, which we did. Phoebe, was another iconic actress for all of us boys who, saw Fast Times. That scene in the swimming pool, was the iconic image of Phoebe, of which she hated. She wished she had never done that. Every movie after that, they'd go, well, in this scene, you're going to be naked. No. So, of course, one of the attractions to her was, for my movie, was she could do flat-out broad comedy, which she, normally didn't get a chance to do. And there was nothing about being sexual. It was really about being the prim and proper and the model, that her father wanted her to be, with her, this angelic face. But then the angel comes in, and obviously jealousy ensues. And I wanted, the first person I brought in for the role of Jim Sanders, the lead, was Jim Carrey. And I saw Jim in a TV show, and I saw this, the movie, something on Main Street. It was like a TV movie, a Fox TV movie that he did. And I knew he could act. I knew he was funny. And, I brought him in first. I said to Dino, here's the guy, and, he really wanted to do the part. And, we talked before and we talked after, and Dino took one look at him. He said, no, this kid, he's a funny, but he's not handsome. You need the handsome. So I said, like who? Tom Cruise. I go,
oh, no.
Can't afford Tom Cruise, and but he went after Tom Cruise, but of course he couldn't afford Tom Cruise. So then the hunt began, and David Duchovny came in. Uma Thurman came in for the Angel. I mean, these are people, again, weren't known at that time. And Michael was the most handsome and could do comedy. And we figured, since he was so huge on All My Children, I think that's it. Yeah. That he would draw an audience. And what we didn't realize is, when you can get Michael for free on TV, why pay to go see him? So that whole idea, unfortunately didn't work. But I love what Michael did. He was incredible to work with. And Emmanuel was obviously an absolute dream of actors to work with. Phoebe was funny and fun. I mean, it was a really enjoyable movie that had a very sad 9 screenings, where, like with Friday the 13th, we had probably about that same amount with the MPAA, because we kept getting an X until we could finally get an R. We stopped the screenings. But with Date with an Angel, Dino was trying to get the ratings as high as they could with audiences, and every audience reacted differently to the cuts. So we just kept recutting it, making it more comic, putting in more, songs from the period. I was amazed that Stevie Winwood gave us, Finer Things, for like no money, and it was a huge hit. I mean, there's things that kind of happened that were cool, but the movie, again, did not come out the way I had originally envisioned this romantic comedy, where the emphasis was on the romantic and the fantasy and a little less on the comedy. And my first cut was about an hour longer than what you see, but it was really taking out a lot of the things that made it more romantic and less comic. But, you know, as these screenings do, they dictate where a movie ends up going. And, you know, it opened and closed in a weekend. There wasn't any money. The Vino's company was already bankrupt. And what happened to it is it became what was known down south as a slumber party movie. It's because of its ratings and who was in it and what it was about. You know, when parents went to Blockbuster, you know, it's like, no, I want this. No, let's go with this movie. And I had more fans from, you know, young girls, you know, that loved the romantic aspect. And, you know, I thought I was making a cool movie for guys as well as girls. But slowly it kind of made its way because of the video and stuff and found, you know, its audience. And every so often these amazing things happen. Like I went to the Magic Castle here in Los Angeles and I saw this magician, and afterwards he heard that I was in the audience and wanted to talk to me. And he said, this movie that you did, Date with an Angel, is my mother's favorite movie. And she makes us watch it at Easter. She makes us watch it at Christmas. She makes us watch it on Valentine's Day. Man, this has been going on for 15 years, you know. Would you talk to her? And I said, it would be my honor, you know. And so I took this woman, and she was, of course, couldn't believe that she was talking to the guy who wrote and directed it. And, you know, she talked about, this is the angel that's going to come for her one day. And I mean, she really, really took it to a whole nother level. And so I said to the guy, can I send her some stuff? He goes, oh, she would love that. So I got, you know, rare pictures and all this stuff, you know, to send her. And then, you know, about maybe a year or two later, I talked to him and he said, I got to tell you that my mom passed on, but she passed on with, at the hospital, we had all those pictures around her. You know, at the end, she looked up and she was smiling, and I knew that she was seeing the angel. And he said, man, we were just crying. And he said, I don't know how to thank you. And I said, I don't know how to accept a thank you on that. That is beyond any concept of what I had for a movie, you know, to have that be something that somebody looked at as a way to go on to the other side with these images that were so important to her. So, I mean, movies sometimes have that other life. And, you know, jumping forward to when I did Something to Live For, the Alison Gertz story about a girl that had AIDS that Molly Ringwald played, you know, we got this award from the health department saying that we saved more lives with that movie because we told people that women could get AIDS too, because at that time it was the gay disease, that's it. The only people that would get it would be gay guys. And, you know, Molly Ringwald's character, the real Alison Gertz, went on this campaign to instruct kids in high schools, you know, practice safe sex, because, you know, because it happened with her with a bartender, you know, in New York. She didn't know the guy was bisexual, and she contracted AIDS. And her story was amazing, that instead of, you know, being angry and shutting down and dying, she used that to keep her life going. And that movie ended up being shown in, you know, high schools as sex education movie. I met Christina Ricci, and she goes, yeah, I remember that movie. I saw it in sex education. So, I mean, again, another bizarre thing that can happen to something that you create purely because, well, this is a good story, this is an important story, but you never thought, you know, it was going to end up in the school system, you know, for that. Date with an Angel was one of those movies that just kind of had this other afterlife, you know, that was very, very surprising. So I'm, again, honored when things become something more than just a piece of entertainment.
You know, we heard about your band that you're in, and so we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. Like, I don't know, just like what kind of music it is. If people don't know about the Sloths, you know, it's kind of like let them know where they can like hear your music or learn more about the band.
All right, I appreciate that. Yeah, the Sloths are part of my second act. One Dark Night certainly had an influence on me, and if I was going to die, I wanted to be entombed at that mausoleum. And I ended up buying a crypt in that mausoleum, paying it off for a long time, and now there's a plaque there on my crypt that says, to die will be an awfully big adventure, Peter Pan. You know, has my name, has my birth date, and then below it is instructions. basically, of what to do when you come there after I'm gone and I'm inside there to feel, communicate on a whole different level. It is sort of my third act. After I'm gone, the show goes on. And it's, you can read about it in the book, and it's also talked about in that documentary, Legends Never Die, Hollywood Forever, that I mentioned. It's on YouTube, so I won't say too much about that. But the Sloths all were part of this thing that happened after I did that, because I wasn't sure where I was going to go. I did all these TV movies, kind of got caught up in this doing Lifetime movies, which I never imagined being a horror director. I'd be doing television for women. But the subject matters that they gave me were friggin' freaky as hell. I mean, cyber sex. Basically, there was one called oh God, what did they end up calling? Because initially it was called Teen Sex, and then they changed it to something else. I can't remember, but Marcia Gay Harden was in it, and it was basically about teenage blowjobs and how you could get syphilis and other things, because at that time President Clinton was saying no, it wasn't sex, that happened with Monica, and so we named the school Clinton Junior High, and so there's a lot of my dark humor in there. But the whole thing to me was that I had done all these movies, and basically I needed to start all over again. 2010, and so I get this phone call from a lawyer who says, I don't know if you know me, but I'd hired a private investigator to find all the members of the Sloths, because that song that the Sloths did back in 1965 just sold, if you had an original 45, for $6,650. I said, $6,600? Why? He said, well, it went on to this compilation of garage songs that nobody seemed to own back in the 80s, and it developed a cult following that none of us knew anything about. When we played in Spain a couple of years ago, we got cheers when we played this thing because they knew it over in Spain. Again, we had no clue that this had occurred. So basically, all the members of the Sloths that were still alive, and the Maywines, which was the group that sort of morphed out of the Sloths, we all got together at a House of Pancakes and talked about the old days and had these interviews with some different music publishing fan magazines and stuff. And out of that became this, hey, why don't we get together? I haven't sang in 45 years, and guitarist was like, yeah, I haven't played really. And a couple of the other guys were in bands and stuff. And we went back into her garage in 2011 and just started to jam and do the songs we used to do in 65. And in those days, we opened for Iron Butterfly, Pink Floyd, Love, Kinks, and The Doors. And The Doors, we did about 3 or 4 shows as opening act. So, we were 15, 16 years old, and all we knew from is we loved the Stones, we loved rhythm and blues, we loved, the Yardbirds, all those bands, and that's all we were trying to do was imitate them. And then eventually the band, broke up, and now we come back together, and we decide we're going to start to write our own stuff as well, but it'll be in the spirit of that. So we have an album that came out, obviously as a nod to the thing that caused the resurrection here of the Sloths back from the grave, the Sloths back from the grave, and perfect with my background, right? Because I bring Jason back from the grave. I bring I bring Jason back from the grave. Raymar is all about being back from the grave one dark night. Sometimes they come back, coming back to me, and it's like all my stuff seemed to have that theme about it. And even, The Angel was about an angel of death coming to, take somebody. So the album it just came out on vinyl finally. And I have this incredible illustrator in Canada, Darren Maddock, and he did one of those classic like Tales of the Crypt cover. And on, you see these zombie sloths coming up out of the grave, You'll see the mausoleum on the cover from One Dark Night. You'll see, Jason's mask hanging on one of the tombstones. The lightning bolt hitting, the tombstone that the sloths are coming out of. So it really does kind of tie in with my movie background as well as, for the sloths coming back. And we've done like over 200 shows. The music has been, getting played all over the place. We're trying to get bookings, in as many places. We're still pretty much an unknown entity, but what we find is incredibly cool that doesn't seem to be a whole lot of people that have done this, is we're really starting up a band, all of us in our 60s. And we are competing with all the, the rock and rollers coming up in their teens and 20s. But my approach to it is I have to have more energy. I have to be more crazy. I have to do more effects on stage. So I electrocute myself up there. I put a knife through my heart and reach in and pull. Turns into 1,000 little hearts of confetti. I try to hang myself with a rope on a song called "End of My Rope." And the rope passes through my neck. So I've taken all my magic sources that I learned from my father, who was a magician, put it into it, as well as the mime sources, having studied with Marcel Marceau, that's on stage with me, as well as, all the rock and roll influences that I had, in the 60s. And the whole band, all of us are kind of approaching this like, if this is our last shot, we're going out, with all guns blazing. And we try to, we've done South by Southwest 3 years in a row now, and we really get an incredible response because it's like nobody expects guys our age to be rocking that hard. And I get the inevitable comparisons to Iggy Pop and Alice Cooper and stuff, who I never saw. I mean, I got Alice, Alice and I knew each other just briefly when he was Vincent. And he had a group called the Nas back in the 60s. And we all hung at Frank Zappa's house. And that's all I knew of Alice, and it was Vincent from Texas. And, he became Alice when the group, was called Alice. And I never saw his show live, though. And I never saw Iggy, still haven't seen Iggy live things. But what I'm doing, tearing over my shirt, doing these theatrical things, there's these comparisons. And I thought, what? Fine. If they got there before me, whatever I'm doing, it's going to have to be compared. And I was like, hey, we obviously are drinking the same Kool-Aid. What can I say? So, but yeah, so the show is very visual. The music is very, old school rock and roll. And yeah, I'd love people to check it out. You can hear it on Spotify. You can hear it on Pandora. It can, it's basically, an album, a CD, and a cassette, as well as, you can stream it. So yeah, please check it out. And because I'd love to hear, what people think. And I try, I write the lyrics. And a lot of the melodies, and collaborate with the bass player Michael Romans, on all the songs. And one cool thing is there's the song that opens the album called "Never Enough Girls in the World," and "Never Enough Girls in the World" was written by Holly Beth Vinson, who was like one of the first female punk guitarists who teamed up with Joey Ramone at one point, and they did a version of "I Got You, Babe" that was actually a hit in England, never over here. And so she had written a song called "Never Enough Girls" for Joey to record. And Joey was getting sick, and they kept putting off the recording session, and eventually, it never happened. So Holly saw us, and we had our guitarist at that time who also worked with her, and she goes, "Would you guys like to have this song?" And it was like a song written for Joey Ramone. I mean, that's like the perfect thing, because we were like one of the first garage bands, and then Ramones are the definitive garage band, playing like just those short songs on 20 straight through. I mean, I'm a huge Ramones fan, so it's like this great honor to actually have that sort of carrying the torch for those guys in a song that we kind of slothicized to make it more our own. Was obviously, intended to be a Ramone song. So that's one of the kind of, cool things that kind of came out of this new, this first album, is that connection. But yeah, the music, I think, if you love old school rock and roll, it'll be your cup of tea, I think. And it's out on Burger Records.
I was just going to say, I actually was jamming out the Back from the Grave album today. It's available on iTunes, so if anybody wants to check that out, I definitely got the old school rock vibe from it. You talked about Ramones and everything, and Rolling Stone vibe. That kind of kinetic energy came through, and I'm like, man, this is really rocking. I'm kind of moving around the house, jamming it out. I absolutely loved it, and the cover art is truly amazing too. So keep up the good work, man. Definitely with that, we love it. Classic rock never dies, really. And if you get a heads up on any dates for Texas, especially the Dallas-Fort Worth area, let me know. I will check it out for sure. I will be there.
Great. Yeah. Well, Texas we love. My girlfriend lives in Texas. She just went back to San Antonio today. I met her down there at the Austin, the South by Southwest when I came down there to Austin. And, we did actually a screening in Dallas of Friday the 13th, less than a year ago, I think it was. What's that big theater, a gorgeous old theater I can't think of the name of the thing.
There are so many theaters over here. It's not the Draft House or anything, is it? Yeah.
No. This is like something it's been there since it was the theater that Lee Harvey Oswald was captured in.
Okay.
How that was, but talk about old history. But it's all been kind of revamped a bit, but it still has that vibe of something that's been around for decades. Very cool. But the main thing was just seeing the movie there with an audience and everybody just so into it. It's great.
Yeah. Well, Tom, again, we had a blast talking to you today, and just want to thank you. It's been an honor to have you on our show, and anytime you have a new project coming up, you're always welcome to. We always love to have you come back and talk about it. So thanks again for coming on.
And one last thing I'd love to, express to all your listeners out there. Yeah. Guys, this is a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't give up your dreams. I mean, what's going on, what I just talked about, the rock and roll, this is what I wanted to do at 15. It took 50 fucking years to get to the point that I got to live that dream, which I'm living now, of being a rock and roller. And there's many things that they just come in their own time. So do whatever you got to do, do the job, do the family, do all the stuff that's important. But hold on to that dream. Don't give it up, because something will happen at some point and you'll get to do that, whatever that is. So, keep going on that dream.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed that interview as much as we did, and we want to thank you for tuning in to this episode and tuning in time after time. And we really appreciate you guys listening to what we do and being interested in what we do. It helps us keep going. And as part of saying thanks, we want to do some giveaways for you guys, so stay tuned for that. As always, you can reach us on social media. On Twitter, we are at Black Cat Podcast. Phantom Dark Dave is at Phantom Dark Dave. And you can find us on Facebook and Horror Amino too. And also, if you'd like to reach us by email, we'd love to see some emails from you guys too. We'd love to see some suggestions, things that you like, things that you don't like about the show. We'd love to see your emails, and just helps us know that you guys are out there and listening, and helps us know more about what you guys want to hear. Also, you can find all of our past episodes on www.blackcatshadow.com and all of our different media outlets that we have where you can download our show at. And you can also find a link to our eBay Black Cat Shadow movie store where you can buy a movie and help support the show. And also, we do have a Patreon page where you can help us out there as well. I think you just go to the Patreon website and just search for Black Cat Shadow. So remember, guys, to take a closer look at the world around you, and you may just find that it is stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat Shadow.